Happy Families podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
The 1/3 who thrived, the 1/3 who rose above their circumstances, had one significant, supportive, stable adult in their lives.
And now here's the stars of our show, my mum and dad.
Today, a really big topic on the Happy Families podcast, talking about why some kids thrive despite adversity. When life is tough, why is it that some kids are strong, they kind of stand tall and say, come on life, try me, and others crouch in the corner and grab the blankie and say, why me? G'day, this is Dr. Justin Coulson. I'm here with Kylie, my wife, and mum to our 6 kids. And hey, pretty excited, Kylie. Tonight, it's the night. Parental Guidance hits Channel 9 as we investigate parenting styles of 10 families around the country and look at who has the best parenting style.
It's the biggest responsibility of our lives.
We want our children to be the good in the world.
Raising a child. But how do you know?
Think about the happiest time in your life.
You're doing it right.
Are you going to watch it with us?
Am I going to watch it with you? Yes, I can't wait. I'm actually looking forward to seeing the kids and how they respond to it. I think it's going to be really exciting. Are you going to watch it with us?
Of course, if it means I get to eat some popcorn.
Yeah, I was going to say, so long as we get the popcorn going. We've got this tradition in our home. When we cook the popcorn, we do it on the stove in some oil. We use the popcorn kernels, and we just love taking the lid off the popcorn and watching it pop everywhere, and the kids scramble for the popcorn. It's embarrassing, but gee, it's fun. Hey, we received some pretty cool feedback the other day about an episode that was fun, but wasn't really, well, let's say it wasn't one of my best moments. It wasn't a podcast where I thought, gee, I gave great advice, but the feedback was overwhelming.
Chrissy said, thanks so much for the podcast episode. Not what I expected.
So just in case you missed that episode, we will link to it in the show notes. But we really just talked about the embarrassing things that our kids do to us, like, and most of it related to toilets and nakedness, didn't it? I mean, that was pretty much it.
She said her family had experienced a terrifying experience 2 nights before. A truck driver had taken out a utility pole in their front yard, and they had literally been stuck inside for up to 12 hours waiting for emergency help to come in.
Wow.
There was electrical wires, live wires, screaming in through the air, and it was very, very scary. And she just said that her mind and body had been shrunk into a state of intense stress and tension, and she kept playing over the incidents and what ifs and just feeling completely and utterly out of control. But she said, on my drive home yesterday, while Kylie told the story about the kids using their bum to swipe a credit card, along with the other stories, she said, I laughed hysterically. And she said, and I finally felt my body release those feel-good chemicals, and the tension finally started to leave my body. What probably seemed like just a silly episode for you has had such an impact on me.
Wow. Well, that's so great. So we will link once again to that because it was, I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of parenting advice in there, but geez, it was darn funny. So we'll link to that one shortly. All right, so we've got a question that's come through, and normally we answer listener questions on a Tuesday, but there's this thing happening with this TV show, and I think that our podcast is going to be pretty busy talking about everything that's happening in parental guidance. So we thought we'd sneak it from Tuesday into Monday. And who asked the question, and what is it, Kylie?
Amy Lee asked a great question. She said, does anyone know why some kids thrive despite adversity? She went on to just say she had a pretty traumatic childhood, and she has some lingering issues with anxiety and depression. But in spite of that, she's actually been able to be a functional member of society, a loving mum, and can honestly say that she strives to do and be better every day.
Yep.
So another family member in the same home went through the same parenting, hasn't fared as well as she has. He's so disorganized. He struggles with anxiety and depression, and just executive function skills are really, really challenging. She worries about him all the time. And so she just wonders why some people come out of trauma and are an exception to the rule, and how we can promote this in our kids.
Well, I've written a book about it called 9 Ways to a Resilient Child, so I could probably talk about this for the next 4 weeks. But obviously this is the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now. So I reckon there's probably, let's say 5 things. I mean, gosh, I feel guilty only saying 5 things. But when I think about the best research over the last, let's say 5 to 6 decades, I'm going to pick on 5 things that I think will give us the biggest head start in getting in front of this to help our children if they're going through trying times, so that they can be resilient and thrive despite the adversity.
It's interesting. You think about it, without trauma in the picture, just going to see a movie. You have a whole heap of people in the room and everyone feels differently about it. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering what your 5 tips are.
Okay, so the first thing we've got to take into account is just the personality of the child, the temperament, and the environment. So I've said that's one thing, but it's kind of grouping 3 things together all at once. But these are the things that we can't actually do very much about. They just are what they are. Like as an individual, I can't do much about my personality. Personality traits are fairly stable across time. They don't change a whole lot. Like we do change throughout our lives, but we're pretty stable. And it's the same with our temperament. You might be a difficult person, or you might be a slow to warm up person, or you might be a really easygoing person. Those personality and temperament aspects, they're just there. And everybody's different. So Amy Lee might be a really easygoing temperament or a slightly anxious, slow to warm up temperament, whereas the other person that she mentioned might just be one of those difficult kind of people. Or maybe somebody's a little bit more neurotic than the other, and that's just a personality. It's literally kind of the way they are from a personality point of view. And the third thing that I mentioned as part of this first idea is just the environment. Like there are some things that you can't control about your environment. For example, you can't control whether you're born into a wealthy democratic country or whether you're born into a totalitarian governed country that is in poverty. Like you just can't control everything in your environment. As a kid, you go to the school that your parents send you to, or you live in the house or the neighborhood or the suburb that your parents live in. Full stop, end of story.
And yet time and time again, you hear these stories though of people who are in just the most depraved situations who rise above it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I love that example, and it reminds me of a research paper, or in fact, a research project that ended up lasting 40 years by a researcher called Emmy Werner, one of the original big-time resilience researchers. And what she found was that people who were born into these indigent circumstances, about 2/3 of them, they kind of just repeat the sins of their parents, if I can use that sort of old-fashioned term. Whatever was done to them, they just kept on doing to the next generation. But about 1/3 of them didn't. And so that's why I put that first, because the environment, the personality, the temperament, that's all kind of stuff that you can't do a whole lot about. It just is what it is. But the next 4 things that I'm going to mention, they all came out of her research. And more and more data supports what she found. And the first of those 4 is the kids, the 1/3 who thrived, the 1/3 who, like you said, rose above their circumstances, had one significant, supportive, stable adult in their lives. Sometimes it was their parent, but sometimes it wasn't, because the parents were in jail, or the parents were alcohol or other drug users and abusers, or the dad wasn't there and there was just a steady stream of different men coming through the house. So it wasn't always a parent. Sometimes it was a school teacher or a grandma or an auntie or an uncle or a neighbour or a scout leader or a church pastor or whatever it might be. But one supportive, stable adult who was always there. There's something extraordinary about having that in your background to help you to get through hard things.
Does the research suggest that one person has to be constant throughout their life?
It doesn't have to be one person constant, but the more stability there is, the better. You don't want to have somebody there for a week and then somebody else for a week.
Of course.
That's going to promote instability. But
yeah, I think back over my life, and while I didn't necessarily have someone throughout my whole childhood, there was always one adult outside of my family that was just there, and they were there for 4 or 5 years. And then I kind of went on to my next season, or we moved house, and there was another adult that I looked up to. And it made such a difference to have multiple people in my life that I could look up to and glean from.
So that's the number one. That is the most important factor when it comes to helping people to thrive despite adversity. The second one I'm going to mention after the break.
It's the Happy Families Podcast.
For a happier family, try a Happy Families membership, because a happy family doesn't just happen. Details at happyfamilies.com.au.
It's the Happy Families Podcast, the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now. And today we are answering Amy's question, why do some kids thrive despite adversity?
So we've covered off how sometimes it's related to personality and temperament, and environment, but also the presence of one stable, supportive, secure adult who's right there. I know, as I was reflecting on that, just when we took that pause for a moment for the break, and I was thinking, many of the things that we've done in our lives, the risks that we've taken, the chances that we've decided to have a go with, we've only done because we've always known that in the background, somebody was there as a support. Somebody was there saying, I believe in you. Somebody was there saying, I think you can do this. Somebody that we could counsel with or lean on. The power of that one supportive adult is just so important. I can't emphasize it enough.
And I don't think it changes even as we grow older. I don't think it's a child thing. I think that as we go throughout life, feeling like we've got that village, feeling like we've got that one person or a handful of people who are just there rallying behind us and supporting us in everything we do.
We celebrate independence and we try to raise our kids to be independent. That's what our culture does. But I don't think it's actually healthy. We really want interdependence. We want to learn how to do what we need to on our own because it's good to be able to be self-sufficient, but relying on other people and bringing the community together, our community of loved ones, friends, neighbours, whoever it might be, that helps us to be so much more resilient. We need people so that we can thrive. The third one, a sense of mastery over life. Emmy Werner and her research team and others since then have found that when we feel like we are able to grapple with the challenges that come our way, when we feel like, it's big and it's coming at me, but I know that if I grab that ball by the horns and wrestle it, I'm going to be able to roll it over and win. I don't know why it suddenly became a bull in my metaphor, but whatever it is, this big challenge that's coming at us, if we can grab it and roll it over and get on top of it and conquer it, a sense of mastery, a sense of capability, a sense of competence is critical. And when we feel like it's too big, it's coming too fast, there's just overwhelm. I don't have the competence. I don't have the ability to master this. That's when resilience plummets and we see our children struggle under the adverse experiences that they encounter in childhood.
So how do we actually help our children feel like they have that competence?
We expose them to challenges and don't helicopter. We don't swoop in and say, oh, that's too hard or that's too dangerous or that's too risky. We let them develop a sense of what's risky and what's hard and what's challenging, and then we gently support them. Remember that first one stable, supportive adult who's there? When we see our child struggle, we walk over to them and we pick them up and give them a hug and say, well, that was really hard, wasn't it? Let's try again. We don't have to do that for everything all the time, but as they encounter difficulties at the age of 2 and learn how to conquer them, they're more equipped and capable of conquering bigger challenges at the age of 3 or 4 and 5 and 6. When we do too much for them, they don't get that sense of mastery. They become dependent. And it's like the child who never gets to walk. They don't develop the leg muscles to support their body as the body grows, and they won't be able to use their body healthily.
I remember one day taking the kids to a rock climbing facility, and there was a smaller area where toddlers could have a go at the climbing wall. And I remembered watching this parent with this small little toddler who was trying to navigate the wall and was really, really struggling with it. And sometimes our desire is to just put their foot in the next safe hold to show them how to do it. And yet I watched this parent they were close by, but they just let their child work it out. And it took 5 or 6 attempts to kind of work out where their next foot needed to go before they could move up a little bit. And it was so amazing to watch because the elation on this kid's face as he kind of went, I just did that. Was so exciting.
So we've got the personality, the temperament, the environment. Then we've got the power of the relationship. We've got a sense of mastery. The last 2, strong executive function and self-regulation. The ability to pause, be in the moment, think things through, inhibit behavior, act when we need to. That's something that develops over time, and it usually develops in harmony with those other things, but it's crucial to help us to thrive despite adversity. And in Amy's email to us, she highlighted that other family member just really seemed to struggle with executive function and self-regulation, and Emmy Werner's research and that of many other researchers since has shown that it's critical for resilience. And the last one, supportive context of affirming faith or cultural traditions. So this research began in the 1950s and went through to the 1990s. And right at the very heart of all of this was this sense of community, this bond that came through shared faith traditions or shared cultural traditions. What we've seen increasingly over the last 10 to 20 years, particularly in Australia, is a real move away from faith traditions and a move away from cultural traditions. It seems that it's good to celebrate certain cultural traditions, but many people are trying to become homogenized, and there's a move away from the very things that used to unite people, the ceremony, the tradition, the sense that we all go and participate in this stuff together and we all learn and grow through it. And yet that's critically important for resilience. It helps people to develop a sense of identity and knowledge of who they are. And as I reflect on these things, I can't help but think of my favorite psychology theory and how much it blends into all of this. If you want your kids to thrive despite adversity, they need to have great relationships. They need to have a sense of competence and mastery and a feeling that they're in control, like they can control things. They've got autonomy. Relatedness, competence, and autonomy fit in so well with having a supportive, stable adult, a sense of mastery over life, and strong executive function and self-regulation. You throw in that sense of community and that last one, and you've got the recipe to help children overcome adverse childhood experiences and live a thriving, resilient life.
Amy Lee, I hope that answers your question.
We really hope that you've enjoyed the podcast and that's helpful for you as you try to raise resilient, happy kids. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. Craig Bruce is our executive producer. Tonight's the night. A quick reminder. Parental Guidance, Channel 9 for our Australian audience, 7:30 p.m. Let's watch these parenting styles in action and see if we can discover Australia's best parenting style. I can't wait to see you on the telly. Have a great day, and if you'd like more info about making your family happy, visit happyfamilies.com.au.